November 19, 1988. A federal parole agent sits at his desk in California and types one sentence into an official government file. The sentence explains why he will not add electronic monitoring to a man named Philip Garrido, a convicted kidnapper and rapist who has just made contact with the woman he attacked 12 years earlier. The sentence reads, "To subject Garrido to electronic monitoring would be too much of a hassle based on the hysteria of the victim." The victim was a 25-year-old woman named Katie Calloway Hall. She had been held against her will for 6 hours and attacked repeatedly. She came to federal authorities because her attacker had been released from a 50-year sentence after serving 11 years, and he had found her. She was terrified, she was specific, she was asking for help. The agent wrote hysteria in her file. He closed the investigation, he went home. 3 years later, on the morning of June 10, 1991, an 11-year-old girl named Jaycee Dugard was walking to her school bus stop in South Lake Tahoe, California. Philip Garrido pulled up beside her in a gray car. He was wearing an ankle monitor, he had a stun gun, he took her. For the next 18 years, Jaycee Dugard lived in a hidden compound in his backyard while parole officers knocked on his front door more than 60 times. They gave him drug tests, they walked through his house, they asked him how he was doing. Not one of them checked what was 40 feet behind the door they knocked on. The utility lines running from the main house to Jaycee's compound were visible from the driveway, every time. This is not simply the story of a girl who was hidden for 18 years. This is the story of one word, written in an official file by a government agent in 1988, and everything that word made possible. Before Jaycee Dugard, there was Katie Calloway Hall. She was 25 years old and working as a card dealer at Harrah's Casino in South Lake Tahoe in the fall of 1976. She was good at reading people. It came with the job. She knew the regulars, recognized the faces that came back week after week, understood the particular social geography of a casino floor where familiarity substituted for friendship. One evening in November, she was leaving work when a man she recognized from the casino floor asked her for a ride. His name was Philip Garrido. She had seen him enough times that he felt like a known quantity, not a friend, but a familiar face attached to a familiar name. She said yes. Within minutes, she understood the depth of that mistake. Garrido pulled out rope and bound her hands. He drove across the state line into Nevada, into Reno, and pulled into an industrial warehouse in a commercial district. For the next 6 hours, he assaulted her repeatedly in a space he had apparently prepared in advance. There was equipment there, things that suggested this had not been impulsive. A police officer on routine patrol noticed a car parked outside a warehouse at an unusual hour, with a broken lock on the door. He knocked. Katie Calloway Hall ran out. Garrido was arrested. At his trial, the prosecution revealed details that should have told everyone in that courtroom exactly who they were dealing with. Garrido testified to watching girls outside their elementary school in the period before the attack. Federal prosecutors stated he had attempted to take another woman just 1 hour before he approached Hall. There was prior planning. There was a pattern. The judge looked at all of it and gave him 50 years in federal prison. He served 11. The U.S. Parole Commission released him on January 20th, 1988. David Shaw, California's Inspector General, later reviewed this decision and described it in one word: inexplicable. Had Garrido served the sentence he received for what he did to Katie Calloway Hall, he would not have been eligible for release until 2027. When Garrido was released, Hall found out not through a letter or a phone call from the authorities responsible for monitoring him. She found out by encountering him. He had sought her out. He made contact. She was immediately and specifically afraid in the way that a person is afraid when the thing they most dreaded has actually happened. She went to the federal parole authorities. She gave them a specific account. She told them what he had done, what he was capable of, what she feared he would do again. She asked for help in concrete terms: electronic monitoring, increased supervision, something that would keep him from operating freely. The parole agent who reviewed her request opened a file and closed it on November 19, 1988. He typed one sentence to explain his decision. To subject Garrido to electronic monitoring would be too much of a hassle based on the hysteria of victim. That word, hysteria, is still in that file. Hall said later that she did not think they believed her. She said it simply, without drama, the way someone states a fact they have had years to absorb. She had done everything right. She had gone to the people whose job was to act on exactly the kind of warning she was providing. She had been specific. She had been credible. She had been present. She was told, in the official language of a government agent, that her fear was hysterical. 3 years passed. She lived with the specific knowledge that the man who had spent 6 hours assaulting her was free and had found her after his release, and that the system designed to protect her had decided her warning was too much of a hassle. In August 2009, when Garrido was arrested in Antioch and the news broke that he had been holding a girl captive since 1991, Hall watched it unfold in real time. Started screaming. She said, "Oh my God, that's who did it. That's who kidnapped me." And then she asked the question that every person who reviewed this case eventually came to: how did it fail so badly? She already knew the answer. It was in a file dated November 19, 1988. Jaycee Lee Dugard was in 5th grade. She had blonde hair and a wide smile, and she was the kind of 11-year-old who existed comfortably at the center of her own world, close to her mother. Terry, close to her little sister Shauna, working out who she was in the ordinary, unhurried way that children work things out when nothing is gone. Her family had moved to South Lake Tahoe from Orange County 9 months before the abduction. They chose it deliberately. It was supposed to be safer, smaller, the kind of community where you knew your neighbors and your children could walk to the bus stop. And the only thing an 11-year-old had on her mind on a Tuesday morning in June was an upcoming field trip, and whether her mother might finally let her start shaving. Those were her concerns on the morning of June 10, 1991. She walked up the hill toward the bus stop. It was warm and clear. Her classmates were already gathering. She was almost there. A gray car slowed down beside her. She thought for a moment it might be someone asking for directions. Nancy Garrido was in the passenger seat with a stun gun. Jaycee fell to the ground. She was pulled into the car. A blanket was thrown over her. The car drove away. Jaycee's stepfather, Carl Probin, was across the street. He watched it happen. He jumped on his bike and chased the car up the hill, pedaling hard, watching the distance grow between him and the car until it was gone entirely, and he had not even gotten close enough to read a license plate. He went to a neighbor's house and called 911. The classmates at the bus stop had seen the whole thing in daylight. Within the hour, police were at the house. Search efforts began. Carl and Terry started what would become an 18-year campaign to find their daughter. Flyers, national television appearances, campaigns, foundations, the sustained refusal of two parents to accept that the question could not be answered. Meanwhile, Garrido drove 190 miles southwest to Antioch, in Contra Costa County, and pulled into the driveway of 1554 Walnut Avenue. That address would be Jaycee's world for the next 18 years. The compound behind the main house was not a sophisticated construction. It was a collection of tents, sheds, lean-tos, and tarps connected to the house by utility lines that ran across the backyard in plain sight. Garrido had been building it gradually before Jaycee arrived. It was designed for one purpose, to house someone who should not be there. In the early months, he kept her restrained. He told her if she tried to escape, the dogs would kill her. He told her if she behaved, she would eventually be allowed more freedom. He told her she was serving a purpose, that by being with him, she was protecting other girls from what he would otherwise do to them. The manipulation began on the first day and did not stop. Jaycee was 11 years old. In 1994, she gave birth to a daughter at a time she was 14. There was no doctor, no hospital, no medical care of any kind. She delivered alone in the compound. In 1997, she gave birth to a second daughter when she is 17. Both girls grew up inside the compound. They had never attended school, never seen a doctor, never spoken to another adult outside those walls. Garrido gave them names and a framework for understanding their world that was constructed entirely around his continued control of it. As years passed, the physical restraints decreased, but the psychological architecture became more complete. Garrido told Jaycee she could not trust the outside world. He told her the authorities would separate her from her daughters if they found them. He assigned her tasks. She ran a small printing business for him, answered phones, interacted with clients, using a name he gave her, Alyssa. She later described this period with a clarity that still surprises people. She did not experience herself as passive. She was adapting to conditions she could not change, finding ways to protect her daughters, building whatever interior life was available inside the space she had been given. She described his approach as using care as its mechanism, alternating between terrifying and kind in a rhythm designed to create dependency. Her daughters called her mom. She taught them herself. She kept them together. In January 1999, responsibility for Garrido's supervision transferred from federal to California authorities. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation did not make their first home visit until 2000, a full year after assuming responsibility. When they did begin visiting, they came regularly. The protocol for a registered offender with Garrido's history included periodic home checks, drug testing, and verification of living arrangements. The visits were documented. Garrido cooperated. He had a printing business running from the property. He had religious materials and a website. He passed his drug tests. His file was marked compliant after each visit. Not one visit record mentioned the backyard. Not one. The Inspector General's report published after Jaycee was found documented each visit in forensic detail. The failures were not all dramatic. Some were individually small: an agent who did not pursue a follow-up question, an officer who accepted an explanation without verification, a supervisor who did not review what subordinates were or were not doing during home checks. But the accumulation of those small failures over 10 years of visits added up to something very large. A video of one of those parole visits was later released publicly. The footage shows the officer moving through rooms of the house. He is thorough in the spaces he checks. He asks standard questions. He confirms who is in the residence. At one point, he asks Garrido directly whether it is just him, his wife, and his mother living there. Garrido gives an answer that satisfies the question. The officer says okay. The officer does not go to the backyard. The utility lines running from the main house to Jaycee's compound are visible in the background of the frame. As the officer prepares to leave, Garrido follows him toward the door and says, "I don't understand. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do." The officer drives away. Jaycee was 40 feet behind the door the officer had just knocked on. In June 2008, a parole agent noticed a young girl on the property during a visit. The girl was approximately 12 years old. She was one of Jaycee's daughters, born in 1994, who had never attended school, never seen a doctor, and had lived her entire life inside that compound. Garrido told the agent she was his niece. The agent accepted this and moved on. In 2006, a neighbor had called local police to report children living in tents in the backyard of 1554 Walnut Avenue. The report was logged. An officer came to the address. The backyard was not checked. The Inspector General's report identified 11 specific documented failures across 3 government agencies. The Federal Parole Commission that released Garrido in 1988 after 11 years of a 50-year sentence, the California Department of Corrections that supervised him after 1999, and the local sheriff's office that received the 2006 neighbor complaint. 11 separate moments. 11 separate decisions that went a different way than they should have. The report's most devastating line was clinical in its language and catastrophic in its implication. Had parole agents searched the Garrido residence during the years 1991 to 1995, they would have found her. They did not search. She was there. The same document noted that parole agents spoke directly with Jaycee Dugard during the period of her captivity. They accepted the explanation Garrido provided for who she was. They drove away. One detail from the Reddit discussion of this case captures the specific quality of the failure better than any official report. All the interviews sound like any questioning of her happened in front of him and with her daughters with his wife. She knew the system had failed her and decided her safety was less important than her daughters. That is what Jaycee understood that the officers visiting her door did not. If she spoke, if she somehow communicated who she was, Garrido could punish her daughters. The leverage was not over her life, it was over theirs. The system that visited 60 times never once created the condition, separation, safety, a room without Garrido present, that would have allowed her to tell the truth, until one person did. August 24, 2009. University of California, Berkeley. Lisa Campbell was the events permit manager for the campus. She processed permit requests, managed scheduling, dealt with a steady stream of organizations and individuals who wanted to use university facilities. It was organized administrative work. She had seen all kinds of people come through. That Monday morning, Philip Garrido walked into her office. He wanted to host a religious event on campus. He had flyers for an organization he called God's Desire. He was animated about it, articulate, persuasive, the kind of person who had practiced this pitch enough times to deliver it fluently. He had 2 girls with him. Campbell looked at them and something registered that did not fit any ordinary category of concern. They were quiet in a specific way. Not bored quiet, not shy quiet. Something she later described as a watchful stillness, the kind that comes from a life spent monitoring someone else's reactions before making any movement of your own. They stood close. They moved when Garrido moved. They did not look around the room the way children look around rooms. Campbell scheduled a follow-up appointment and contacted Garrido's parole officer, Edward Santos, with her specific concerns. She told him what she had seen. She described the girls. Santos ran a background check. Philip Craig Garrido, registered sex offender, on parole for kidnapping and criminal sexual assault. The notation in his file said he had no children. The 2 girls had no official existence. Santos had not known they were there. Nothing in the years of parole visits had generated a single notation suggesting that 2 children were living on the Antioch property. They were not in any school enrollment record. They were not in any medical record. From the perspective of every official database in California, they did not exist. Santos ordered Garrido to bring the girls to the parole office in Concord on August 26th. Garrido showed up with Nancy, with the 2 girls, and with a 3rd woman. He called the 3rd woman Alyssa. He said she was a friend of the family. She was quiet. She sat where she was directed. The girls stayed close to her. The initial questioning began. Garrido answered with the practiced ease of a man who had been managing these conversations successfully for 18 years. His answers flowed. He kept the narrative moving. He had an explanation for everything. Then the parole officer made a routine procedural decision that changed everything. She separated them. Garrido and Nancy were taken to one room, the 2 girls to another. The woman called Alyssa was taken aside by herself, away from Garrido, away from Nancy, away from the daughters she had been using as silent leverage for 18 years. Alone, with an official who was not Garrido, in a room he did not control. The questioning shifted. The answers became slower, more careful. Details that did not fit Garrido's account began to surface, small at first, then larger. The specific quality of what the officer was hearing changed. She pressed. The woman said her real name, Jaycee Lee Dugard. Taken from a school bus stop in South Lake Tahoe at the age of 11. She was 29 years old. The 2 girls with her were her daughters. They had been born in that compound. Santos called the Antioch police. Garrido and Nancy were detained. Officers went to 1554 Walnut Avenue and walked into the backyard for the first time in the 18 years that property had been under official supervision. The compound was still there, the tents, the sheds, the lean-tos, the utility lines. The space where 3 people had lived their entire world without anyone in authority thinking to walk 40 feet past the front door. Parole officer Santos later said he had no idea the children existed. He had been visiting the property as part of his case assignment. He had no information suggesting anything unusual was occurring. He was doing his job the way the job had been defined for him. The definition had not included the backyard. August 27, 2009. Terry Probin had last seen her daughter at the end of a driveway on a June morning 18 years earlier. She had spent those 18 years doing what parents of missing children do when there is no confirmation either way. neither the confirmation that allows grief to form completely nor the confirmation that allows hope to stop. She had filed reports and made phone calls and appeared on national television and maintained the particular sustained alertness of a person who cannot afford to stop looking. She had raised Jaycee's little sister Shauna. She had kept Jaycee's room. On August 27th, the phone rang. The reunion happened privately. What was said in that first conversation has stayed between them. What is documented is that Jaycee was alive, that her daughters were alive, and that all three were physically present and could be reached. Terry drove. The 18 years compressed into a car journey. Jaycee later described the process of reintegration with the same clear-eyed precision she brought to describing captivity, not as a rescued victim processing trauma, but as a person making active decisions about how to rebuild a life that had been interrupted at age 11 and resumed at 29. She was not the 11-year-old her mother had been looking for. She was a 29-year-old woman with 2 daughters, an interior life she had constructed under extraordinary conditions, and a specific understanding of what she wanted and did not want from the world outside the compound. Her daughters, who had never attended school, never seen a doctor, never spoken to anyone outside the property, were placed in programs to address the gaps in their development. California's Attorney General's office later estimated that providing the 3 of them with lifetime therapy and counseling would cost approximately $7 million. The cost of providing the daughters with the education they had never received was estimated at $450,000. The state of California settled the family's lawsuit for $20 million. It was the largest settlement in California history related to failures in the parole supervision system. The state acknowledged what its own Inspector General's report had already confirmed, that the parole supervision of Philip Garrido had failed in 11 specific documented ways across 3 agencies in nearly 2 decades, and that those failures had cost a child her childhood, her adolescence, her education, her freedom, and 18 years of her relationship with her mother and sister. $20 million was the number the state put on that. April 28, 2011. Philip and Nancy Garrido entered their pleas guilty. The charges against Philip were extensive: kidnapping, multiple counts of criminal sexual assault, false imprisonment, and charges related to what had occurred throughout the 18 years of captivity. He pleaded guilty to 29 felony counts. Nancy pleaded guilty to charges related to her role in the kidnapping and captivity. She had been in the passenger seat. She had used the stun gun. She had helped manage the compound. She was present throughout. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life. Nancy received 36 years to life. The disparity between those numbers was noted by many people who followed the case. Both individuals had participated in the kidnapping. Both had maintained captivity for 18 years. The sentences reflected different levels of culpability in the assaults. Philip had committed them. Nancy had facilitated the conditions, but the arithmetic of the numbers produced its own kind of statement. Jaycee did not attend. She sent a written statement. Her mother Terry stood in the courtroom and read it aloud. The statement was not long. It was precise. It covered everything it needed to cover, and nothing it did not. I have come to realize that the reality I was taught is that monsters come in the dark, they hide, they are scary looking. The truth is evil can look just like you and me, and is also wearing Nike sneakers and drives a normal car. The truth is evil can look just like you and me. And then, I choose not to be here today because I refuse to waste one more second of my life in your presence. You stole my life and the life of my family. Terry read those words in the courtroom while Philip Garrido sat across the room. He had presented himself for 18 years as a man doing everything he was supposed to do, to neighbors who described him as pleasant, to clients of his printing business who had no idea what was in the backyard, to parole officers who knocked on his door and left with their paperwork complete. He had managed every room he entered. He could not manage the room where a woman stood and read his victim's words to a judge. Jaycee had not come. That was also a decision. Terry Probin stood in that courtroom and read her daughter's words to a man who had spent 18 years controlling every room he was in. But what happened after the sentencing and the detail about how California responded to 18 years of documented failure changes how you understand everything you just watched. If this video has been valuable to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone you love. It might matter more than you think. Jaycee Dugard founded the Jake Foundation in 2011. Jake, Justice, Awareness, Healing, and Compassion, was built specifically for families of children who had survived captivity and needed support navigating the particular challenges of reintegration. It was not a general advocacy organization. It was built from specific knowledge about what that process actually required and what existing systems failed to provide. She published her memoir, A Stolen Life, in 2011. She published a follow-up, Freedom, My Book of Firsts, in 2016. Both books became bestsellers. She did not write them as victims writing about suffering. She wrote them as a person documenting an experience with honesty about both the horror and the survival. Her daughters, who in the documents and early coverage were referred to only as Angel and Starlet, the names Jaycee had given them in the compound, grew up. They received education. They received medical care. They received the things that had been withheld from them from birth. They were not publicly identified. Jaycee kept them out of the media deliberately. That was her decision to make, and she made it clearly. Katie Calloway Hall watched all of it unfold. She had been living with the knowledge of what her warning had contained and what had been done with it for more than 2 decades. When the settlement was announced, and when the Inspector General's report confirmed that the file note from 1988 was part of the documented chain of failure, she gave interviews. She said she was furious. She said she had gone to authorities. She had been specific. She had told them he was capable of exactly the kind of thing they later confirmed he had done. She had given them the information they needed to at minimum increase his supervision and at maximum return him to prison for the violation of making contact with his victim. The agent had used the word hysteria. She said, "How did it fail so badly?" She has never received a satisfying answer to that question. No individual agent has been named publicly as facing consequences for the 1988 file. Note, the report identified systemic failures rather than individual accountability. The word is still in the file, 431 years. That is the sentence Philip Garrido received. Under California's elderly parole program, prisoners who are 60 or older and have served at least 25 years are eligible for parole consideration. Garrido was born in 1951. He became eligible for parole board consideration after serving 25 years of his 431-year sentence. That eligibility date arrived. The state of California, the same state whose Inspector General called his original release inexplicable, whose parole system failed to check a backyard 60 times, who paid $20 million to acknowledge those failures, had a hearing process through which the man sentenced to 431 years could petition for release. This detail appeared in coverage and generated the specific category of outrage that brought people to comment sections and Reddit threads and to send videos to people they know. The number 431 sounds permanent. The mechanism underneath it is not. Jaycee Dugard's foundation continued its work regardless. She was not waiting for the legal system to provide safety. She was building something that did not depend on the system doing correctly what the system had demonstrated it could fail at completely. The Jake Foundation has served hundreds of families since 2011. It has provided support to survivors and their families navigating exactly the process Jaycee and her daughters navigated. It operates on the specific knowledge of someone who went through it. That is not the ending the official record would have written. It is the ending she wrote herself. We have come to the end. Thanks for watching till this very end. If you found this video interesting and would like to help get it noticed by the algorithm, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Another way you can help is by checking out another one of our videos like this one. Thank you for watching, and be sure to click the video on your screen now for another fascinating cold case investigation.